Hey everybody, welcome back. This is episode 2 of the new LaxRecords weekly highlight show. This week we're going to talk a little bit about Florida, a little bit about Georgia, and definitely some of the players with interviews that have been dominating from around the country. Let's get started. All right, we're going to jump right into the show this week, everybody. This week we're starting out in Ponte Vedra, Florida. It is obviously well in the south. Anybody who has been following the Instagram feed this week knows that Ponte Vedra has actually been the team that has taken over the Instagram account this week, and that was not by accident. The Sharks are more or less one of the favorites. We'll say one of them because I think there's Jupiter out of Florida, who's also the defending champion, and a couple other teams that are going to really vie for that state championship this year. But after talking with Lee Roggenberg at Florida Lacrosse News, Ponte Vedra seems to be the team that a lot of people are liking, at least at this point in the season. And they have not disappointed as of yet. They are off to a 5-0 start, and they have been pretty dominant. The Sharks' defense has only allowed 15 goals through its first 5 games, while its offense has scored 90. Yes, that's right, 90. So they've been dominant on both sides of the ball, which, as anybody knows, is pretty much a key to winning a championship. If you can dominate both sides of the ball, you're probably going to win a lot of games. They recently had a game on Friday night against Woodward Academy, and you guys might recognize that name from episode 1 when we talked to Eric Molliver from Woodward Academy. They just defeated Woodward by a score of 19-7. Yeah, you heard that right. It was a pretty dominating performance all around by the Sharks, highlighted by Jimmy Burns, their face-off guy. Burns went 19 of 22 on the face-off against Woodward, which obviously helps a lot to get to scoring those 19 goals. So congratulations to Jimmy and congratulations to the Sharks. It is just one of those early season results, especially with the interstate matchups, that are very impressive to watch. And for anybody who listens to the podcast or saw the new video podcast that we have, and you'll know if I learned how to link it in the video, because I'm still learning this, it'll be right here, but otherwise I'll link it in the description below. But we talked with John Lancey, who is the organizer of the Brian King of Spring tournament. Ponte Vedra is actually heading to the Brian King of Spring, where they are going to have a very interesting matchup against another Georgia team, where they're going to play Lambert. That is a very good game to watch because that is probably two of the most dominant programs in the Southeast region, really probably over the last 10 years since I've been covering high school lacrosse. So that's going to be a very interesting matchup to watch. But Ponte Vedra is also playing Memphis University School, which has been basically one of the 3 teams out of Tennessee for, again, at least the last decade, if not more. So Ponte Vedra has a definite gauntlet coming up on the road in North Carolina, assuming the weather holds off. I know North Carolina's had a little bit of trouble with the weather for the past week, so let's really cross our fingers and hope that those games get to be played because those are going to be some pretty phenomenal matchups. We're going to stick down south and we're going to talk a little bit of Lovett School out of Georgia and another Florida school, Lake Highland Prep. Lovett is another team that has been off to a pretty good start for the season. The Lions have started 4-0, and they are recently coming off a win over Lake Highland Prep out of Florida, which has been one of the programs out of Florida for, again, the last decade. They actually beat Lake Highland Prep 8-7 in overtime. It was a pretty impressive effort by the Lions. Obviously, in a game like that, there's a lot of accolades to go around, but we're going to highlight Lovett goalie Charlie Higgins. He made 17 saves in that game to help lead them to victory. We're also going to call out Denison commit Reed Edelstein, who scored the game-winning goal to lead the Lions to the victory. I want to take a little bit of a look at Lake Highland Prep because right now the team is 3-2, and yes, they're coming off a loss, but Lake Highland Prep seems to be one of those teams that may be primed for a late season run. Their 2 losses are by a combined 3 goals. They dropped a 2-goal game to Cardinal Mooney in just their second game of the season, was their 17-15, and then obviously the last loss against Lovett. So whenever I see a team that is battling, especially teams that are favorites, Cardinal Mooney is another one of the teams that people are really looking at in Florida this year. Lovett is obviously one of the powers in Georgia. So when you start to get these 1-goal, 2-goal losses, especially early in the season, I usually take that as, this may be a team that's still getting its feet underneath of it, and then we're going to actually see what they have later in the season. It's really not going to take long to see what Lake Highland Prep is like towards the end of the season. In the beginning, middle of March, which is basically halfway through their year, they're going to actually play St. Thomas Aquinas out Fort Lauderdale, and they actually play Ponte Vedra. So I think those will be some really good matchups to watch. But then at the end of the season, they're actually playing Bishop Moore and Jupiter, which is like 2 of their last 3 games of the year. They finished the year with a Lake Mary squad that was another state power last season. So it's going to be really interesting to watch to see what the Highlanders have towards that end of the year, because any combination of those games could actually be potential playoff previews. We're going to head up Interstate 95 into Georgia. This week we actually have a Maryland commit and a Michigan commit on the show. We're going to start with the senior, Ryan Siracusa at a Centennial. Now, anybody who's followed lacrosse recruiting or lacrosse out of Georgia will probably recognize that name. He is a University of Maryland commit, but he is actually one of the guys that are approaching 400 career points this season. And in the first game of the season, he scored the 200th goal of his career. He did that with a 7-goal performance. He followed that up with a 5-goal performance in the second game of his career. So right now he's sitting at 205 points. He entered the season with about 330 points, so barring injury, it's pretty safe to say that he is going to be the next member of the 400 club. Now, Ryan's role on the team may have changed a little bit this season, because last year he was part of a trio of players that included Nicky Solomon and Colin Hall, who all had 300 career points by the end of the season. And from what I've been able to find, I think that was a first, because I have not been able to find a team that has had 3 players with at least 300 career points at the same time on the same roster, again, at the same time. We talked with Ryan about his role on the team this year and more in an interview. Ryan, I wanted to talk to you first. You hit 200 career goals, first game of the season, so you wasted no time to get to that, and I know you're quickly approaching 400 career points. How aware were you of your stats kind of heading into this season?
So I knew I had 315 going into the season, but I actually had no idea that was close to 200 career goals. Because when people all said it, I was like, oh, wow, really? Like, I really had no idea.
Yeah.
But it's cool.
Yeah, there's a pretty elite class of guys that have reached that kind of level. Like, does that kind of stuff mean, what does it mean to you? Does it mean anything?
It means something to me, but I don't know how many people really get to that level. I just know that I've always been like behind Nicky, and he's always been setting the records, and Nate and stuff like that. Those are the only 2 people I really know.
I know you guys have only played 2 games, but what is your role kind of shaping up to be this season?
So right now my role is pretty much they're just trying to get me the ball at like all times. Like I'm pretty much running the entire offense. I get the ball every possession, and I start the possessions. And yeah, it's different from last year though, because Nicky would have the ball to X and we'd be cutting. And yeah, it's just different this year though.
Yeah, how much of an adjustment is that for you?
It's pretty big. I didn't realize how big it was going to be, but like I've been so tired after these games, and it's a lot of fun though, because I love scoring and I love getting the ball and being like the man of the team. It's so much fun.
Yeah. So is it just, you said tired after games, is it just mentally because it's one of those, like it's a different shift in the way you've played the last few, because I guess you played 3 seasons with Nicky, so completely different kind of team this year, I'd have to imagine.
It's mentally and physically more tiring. My body's beat right now.
Yeah. Do you find, I guess without Colin and Nicky, do you find, again, only through first 2 games, but are people keying on you a little bit more because you're the known name and known quantity on the team?
Yeah, no, they're definitely keying on me a little more. Although no team has locked me off yet, and they were expecting that to happen, but they haven't locked me off yet, which is good.
Yeah.
So that helps. But
yeah.
I think that'll come soon.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys got some pretty good teams coming up on your schedule this year. I know you guys, obviously. I think are you guys playing Lambert again this season?
We play Lambert and Lassiter. We'll play Johns Creek. We play all the good teams in the.
Thanks to Ryan for sitting down with me on a Saturday afternoon to talk about his career so far. We're going to move a little bit into Georgia, and we're going to talk with Michigan commit Ben Hall. He's out of Kennesaw Mountain, and he reached the 300 club with a 10-goal, 4-assist performance in just the 3rd game of his season. Now, anybody who watched last week realized Ben was one of those players that I mentioned last week with Eric Molliver and Brooks Barrow as 3 juniors that are pretty much putting an assault on the Georgia State record book this season. So I talked to Ben about reaching the 300th point of his career and just about his team in general. How aware were you of, like, I guess your career point totals heading into the season? Because I know Coach Whitmore, he emailed me, I guess, because you had a 14-point game that put you at exactly 300. So how aware were you of where you were and before that game?
I was aware. We had a week off before that Tuesday game, and I was aware of it going into the game. And then honestly, once I step on the field and the whistle blow, I honestly that stuff kind of just slips to the back.
Mm-hmm.
But then I like came off the field, and then somebody was like, "You just got your 300th career point," and I was like, "Oh wait, I did." Like I actually didn't realize until someone mentioned it, but I was aware of it going into the game. It's just it slipped my mind during the game.
So when did you kind of realize that one, I'm pretty good at lacrosse, and two, I might actually have a career beyond high school with this?
Honestly, I'm not really sure. I don't think it really clicked in my mind about like I can I can play like, Division I college lacrosse until probably going into maybe my freshman year when I actually went to the tournament, saw these coaches, and was getting interest, and I was like, wow, like this is real kind of thing. Like I don't know, one of those things that you always like. It's been my dream since I was little.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always said, like I want to play Division I college lacrosse. I want to be a Division I athlete. But I think until it really started happening, that's the moment that I was kind of like, all right, like this is it.
I'm going to give you a chance to talk about some of your teammates. I know you can't mention everybody, but who are a couple of the guys on the team that people maybe should know or will be hearing about.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, a midfielder, Cage Dees. He's really stepped up. He stepped up towards the end of last year. He was, I think, towards the end of the year, he was probably our biggest producer to the midfield. He missed 2 games early this year, but he's back from injury, so that's a big one for us, getting him back. And then on attack with me, Eli Moore, and me and him have kind of been like a good 1-2 punch since my freshman year. And then on attack with me this year, Jackson Fair, he's phenomenal on the crease, always finding those seams.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, like you said, I can't go through everything. I can go through everything and what each person does, but I'd probably say those are the main 3 guys that produce a lot for us and help our success.
All right, we're moving way across the country and over to La La Land. We're moving into Los Angeles, California. Because a couple weeks ago, I talked with Jim Loftus. He runs Max Lax LA. I wanted to know about the teams and players to watch out of the Los Angeles area. Now, Max Lax, they cover several different areas in California. I know they do kind of Orange County and San Diego. I talked with him. If you want to hear the entirety of that interview, he's actually going to be the guest on this coming week's podcast. So this next Sunday, you'll be able to see it on the LaxRecords YouTube channel, and you'll also be able to hear it on your podcast player of choice. But specifically today, I asked him about Loyola Los Angeles, and because they are the number 1 team in their preseason poll. So let's see what Jim had to say about the Cubs.
They have built themselves into a West Coast power that is pretty close to what you would think of when you think of Jesuit in San Francisco. In fact, they've played Jesuit each of the last couple of years. Last year, I think it was a 1-goal loss at Jesuit, and I believe they have them on the schedule again this year. I'm not positive about that, but Loyola has been trying to become, and I think is just about there, a truly national program. I saw the other day, I believe they're playing Garden City, New York, this season. So they play Torrey Pines out of San Diego every year. They haven't quite gotten to the point where they're beating those teams, but they're playing them tough. And the Torrey Pines game, I think they were within a goal, and then Torrey got a goal in the closing minute last year to make it a little more comfortable. But Loyola is far and away right now the premier team in LA.
So outside of Loyola, who else is kind of knocking on the door?
Well, Palos Verdes was the area leader, the LA area leader anyway, for a number of years. And Loyola kept sort of knocking on the door and finally was able to knock them off a few years ago and take over that perennial number 1 spot. So PV is number 2. And I think out of the 30 votes in our poll, I think I want to say they got 28 second place votes. So they're pretty well acknowledged as a clear number 2. And they're another team that always brings talent through the program, sends a couple guys off to college and then brings in some freshmen who will contribute. And they had a freshman attackman last year, Brad Sharp, who was, as a freshman, I believe he was an All-American and area offensive player of the year. So he's, again, 1 year and he's still growing. He's going to be one to watch for the next couple of years there. So PV's clearly number 2. And then there's a whole bunch of teams that you could argue anywhere between 3 and 5 or 6 in our rankings. Let me pull up the poll just so I don't miss anybody, because that's sort of how many there are. Harvard Westlake is Agura, Chaminade of LA, Oak Park, Oaks Christian. I mean, I'm down at number 8 now with Westlake, and there's talent in every one of those programs. And in some cases, it might be a little bit of a few mental letdowns that end up losing a couple of close games. I think Chaminade, which is number 5 in our preseason poll, lost 3 games last year by 1 goal, and all of them were winnable games, but they had that 1, 2, or 3 minute lapse or 5-minute lapse where they just let it get away from them and couldn't get it back.
It's worth noting that since I talked with Jim a few weeks ago, the Cubs have gotten off to a 2-0 start, and goalie Will Parducci was actually one of my honorable mention players of the week last week. So they're off to a pretty good start, and I think the Inside Lacrosse poll just came out this week, and I think they're the number 9 team in the preseason. So considering they only do 10, and considering the teams, I think Torrey Pines was number 1, there's a pretty impressive roster of teams, and Loyola Los Angeles has a pretty good schedule this season, so it's definitely going to be one to keep an eye on the Cubs for this year. That's pretty much going to do it for this week's show, but before we go, I want to head back to Florida, and I'm going to give a big shout out to Providence School head coach Brian Thies. He actually won the 200th game of his career last week, so congratulations, coach. He's made several stops in Florida. He coached at Winter Springs, he coached at Lake Brantley, so he's been winning for a number of years now. Congratulations, coach. Thanks for watching this week, everybody. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, it'll give you all the notifications, leave a comment below, and obviously hit that thumbs up. Everybody, have a week.